Before Alfred Nobel patented dynamite in 1867, Americans had already bored approximately 6,000 tunnels through mountain rock. Every single one of those tunnels was cut with black powder, hand drills, sledgehammers, and chisels. The Hoosac Tunnel in Massachusetts was the longest at 4.75 miles. It took 24 years and killed 195 workers. The other 5,999 tunnels are mostly anonymous to the modern record. Many of them are still in service today. 6,000 tunnels. That number sounds wrong on first hearing, but the historical record supports it. Between approximately 1820 and 1867, American workers bored tunnels for railroads, canals, mining operations, water supply systems, and a handful of urban infrastructure projects. The vast majority were small tunnels under 1,000 feet long, cut for mining adits or water supply lines. A few dozen were major transportation tunnels over 1,000 feet long. A handful approached or exceeded a mile in length. The Hoosac at 4.75 miles was the longest. The cumulative bored mileage across the 6,000 tunnels probably exceeded 800 miles of mountain rock cut by hand and explosive between 1820 and 1867. All of it before Alfred Nobel made dynamite available as a commercial blasting tool. The labor of pre-dynamite tunneling was unlike any other heavy industrial work in American history. The tools were simple, the work was rhythmic, the danger was constant, the progress was slow. A pre-dynamite tunneling crew typically advanced the rock face by between 1 and 3 feet per shift, depending on the rock hardness and the crew's experience. A 10-foot advance per day was excellent. A 20-foot advance per day, achievable only in soft rock or with very large crews, was rare. Mountain railroad tunnels of more than a mile in length, which became common after 1840, typically took 3 to 7 years of continuous work to complete. The standard tunneling method used star drilling crews to bore powder holes into the rock face. A star drill is a long iron rod with a star-shaped chisel head at the bottom end. The drill was held by one man, the holder, in a vertical position against the rock face. A second man, the striker, swung a sledgehammer to drive the drill into the rock. After each strike, the holder rotated the drill a quarter turn so that the star points cut a fresh edge of rock with each successive hammer blow. The drill bored a circular hole into the rock approximately 1 inch in diameter. Powder holes for blasting were typically 2 to 4 feet deep. A skilled star drilling team could bore a powder hole in 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the rock hardness. After a set of powder holes had been bored across the rock face, the blasting crew loaded each hole with black powder cartridges and fuse cord. Black powder is a mixture of saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur. It burns rapidly rather than detonating, which makes it useful for breaking rock by gas expansion rather than by shockwave. A typical powder charge was 3 to 6 ounces per hole, with multiple holes loaded simultaneously to break a large section of rock face at once. After loading, the crew lit the fuses and retreated to the safety of the tunnel mouth or a side adit. The powder shot. The rock face broke. The rubble fell into the tunnel floor. If you appreciate the depth of these American industrial heritage stories and want to support more of them, join at the Boss tier for early access and members-only polls, or Final Boss for member shoutouts and members-only videos. The link is in the description below. Now we walk through the named tunnels that made up the bulk of the pre-dynamite American tunneling tradition. The Union Canal Tunnel near Lebanon, Pennsylvania, completed in 1828, was the first major American transportation tunnel. It carried the Union Canal under the ridge between the Susquehanna and Schuylkill watersheds in central Pennsylvania. The tunnel was 729 feet long, 18 feet wide, and 14 feet high. Construction took 3 years. The Union Canal Tunnel used black powder blasting and hand drilling exclusively, with crews of approximately 40 workers at peak. The tunnel served canal boat traffic until the 1880s, when the canal system was abandoned in favor of rail transport. The tunnel still exists today as a state historical site, with the original 1828 stonework largely intact. The Allegheny Portage Railroad tunnels in central Pennsylvania were a series of short rail tunnels built between 1831 and 1834 to carry the Pennsylvania main line of public works over the Allegheny Mountains. The Portage Railroad used a system of inclined planes connected by short rail segments, with the rail segments running through several tunnels, including the Staple Bend Tunnel, the longest at 901 feet. The Staple Bend Tunnel was the first railroad tunnel in the United States. It carried the canal boats and rail cars of the Portage Railroad system from 1834 until 1854, when the Pennsylvania Railroad displaced the Portage system with a more efficient direct rail route. The Staple Bend Tunnel still exists in essentially original form within the Allegheny Portage Railroad National Historic Site. The mining adit tunnels that made up 4,000 of the 6,000 pre-Dynamite American tunnels deserve their own detailed description, because they are the most numerous and the least documented category. A mining adit is a horizontal tunnel driven from a hillside into a vein of ore-bearing rock. The adit serves as the access path for miners to reach the working face, as the haulage route for ore removal, and as the drainage path for groundwater that accumulates in the mine workings. American mining adits between 1820 and 1867 were concentrated in the iron and copper mines of Upper Michigan, the anthracite coal mines of Pennsylvania, the bituminous coal mines of Virginia and Maryland, the gold mines of California, the silver mines of Nevada, and the iron mines of New York's Adirondack Mountains. The Michigan copper region alone had over 1,000 pre-Dynamite mining adits driven into the Keweenaw Peninsula between 1845 and 1867. The Pennsylvania anthracite region had approximately 1,500 adits across the various coal-bearing valleys. The mining adit construction technique was similar to the railroad and canal tunnel methods, but adapted to the smaller cross-section and shorter length typical of adit work. A standard mining adit was approximately 6 feet wide and 7 feet high, just enough room for a worker to walk upright with a load on his back, or to push a small iron rim ore cart on rails. The adit was driven horizontally into the hillside following the strike of the ore vein, which sometimes meant the adit had to curve and twist to track the vein through changing geology. The bore was advanced by the same star drilling and black powder methods used in railroad tunneling, but with smaller crews of 2 to 4 miners per face and shorter shifts due to the cramped working conditions. A typical mining adit could be driven at 5 to 15 feet per day depending on the rock hardness, somewhat faster than railroad tunnel work, because the smaller cross-section required less total rock removal per linear foot of advance. The water supply tunnels that made up another 1,000 of the 6,000 pre-Dynamite American tunnels were concentrated in urban water systems built between approximately 1830 and 1865. New York City built the Croton Aqueduct system with extensive tunneling between 1837 and 1842, including several tunnels through Westchester County granite to carry the gravity-fed water flow from the Croton Reservoir to Manhattan. Boston built the Cochituate Aqueduct system between 1845 and 1848, with tunneling through ridges between Lake Cochituate and the Boston Reservoir. Philadelphia built the Schuylkill water supply tunnels between 1851 and 1855. Pittsburgh built the Allegheny River water supply tunnels in the 1860s. Cincinnati built the Ohio River water supply tunnels in the 1850s and 1860s. St. Louis built water supply tunnels under the Mississippi River bluffs in the 1850s. San Francisco built water supply tunnels through the Coast Range Hills in the 1860s. The Hoosac Tunnel in Massachusetts is the symbolic capstone of pre-Dynamite American tunneling. Construction began in 1851. The original plan was to bore through the Hoosac Mountain in 3 years using conventional black powder methods. 3 years turned into 10. 10 turned into 20. The bore eventually opened in 1875, 24 years after groundbreaking. The total death toll was at least 195 workers, primarily Irish immigrant laborers, killed in blasting accidents, rock falls, hoist failures, gunpowder fume lung disease, and one major central shaft hoist disaster on October 17, 1867 that killed 13 men at once. Local Massachusetts residents called the Hoosac the Bloody Pit during construction. The tunnel remains in active rail service today under Pan Am Railways. The Hoosac is the subject of a separate video in this batch. The Mont Cenis tunnel in the European Alps, completed in 1871, was the technical precedent that informed late Hoosac construction methods. The Mont Cenis ran 8.5 miles through the Alps between France and Italy. Construction began in 1857 and used the same black powder hand drilling methods that American crews were using at the Hoosac. The Mont Cenis crews developed pneumatic drilling technology in the early 1860s, with the first pneumatic drills operational by 1861. The Hoosac construction adopted pneumatic drills shortly afterward. The pneumatic drill, when paired with compressed air piped into the tunnel from a portal compressor, allowed faster star drilling than hand hammer methods. A pneumatic drill could bore a powder hole in 3 to 5 minutes versus the 15 to 30 minutes of hand drilling. Pneumatic drills came into use across American mountain tunneling between 1865 and 1869, just before dynamite became commercially available. If you are new here and enjoying this kind of historical depth, subscribe so you do not miss the next video. We publish 2 videos per day this week. Now we walk through the transition to dynamite after 1867 and what it meant for the cumulative pre-dynamite tunneling record. Alfred Nobel patented dynamite in 1867. Dynamite is nitroglycerin absorbed into a stabilizing medium, originally diatomaceous earth, which makes the otherwise dangerously unstable nitroglycerin safe to handle and transport. Nitroglycerin itself had been discovered by the Italian chemist Ascanio Sobrero in 1847, but it was so dangerous to manufacture, store, and transport that it had limited practical use for the next 20 years. Nobel's stabilization breakthrough made dynamite a practical blasting tool. American tunneling operations began switching from black powder to dynamite within months of the patent's commercial availability in 1868. The Hoosac Tunnel made the switch in 1868, with dynamite replacing black powder for the final 7 years of bore completion. The dynamite transition cut tunneling time per mile by approximately 70%. A dynamite charge in a properly bored hole could break 6 to 10 times more rock than an equivalent black powder charge. The blasting crews could remove more rubble per shift. The drilling crews could space the powder holes further apart, reducing the total drilling time per round. The combined effect was that a mountain tunneling project that would have taken 20 years using pure black powder methods could be completed in 6 to 8 years using dynamite methods. The Moffat Tunnel in Colorado, completed in 1928, used dynamite throughout its 5-year construction and is featured in another video in this batch. The dynamite transition also cut tunneling casualties per mile by approximately 50%. Black powder accidents in pre-1868 tunneling included premature detonations, fuse cord failures, gas accumulation explosions, and lung disease from black powder smoke exposure. Dynamite accidents included different failure modes, including transport explosions, drill hole tamping accidents, and the same fuse cord failures. But the overall per-mile casualty rate dropped substantially because the dynamite methods allowed fewer total powder shots per mile of bore. The 6,000 pre-dynamite American tunnels can be roughly categorized by purpose and survival. The largest category was mining adits, the horizontal tunnels driven into hillsides to access coal seams, iron ore deposits, copper veins, silver ore, and gold-bearing rock. Mining adits accounted for approximately 4,000 of the 6,000 tunnels. Most of these adits were short, under 500 feet, and most are now closed or abandoned as the mines they accessed have been worked out or sealed by safety order. Some are still in working order in active mining regions. The second largest category was water supply tunnels, the horizontal tunnels driven through ridges to carry municipal or agricultural water from higher elevation sources to lower elevation use points. Water supply tunnels accounted for approximately 1,000 of the 6,000. These tunnels were typically short, 400 to 2,000 feet, and many are still in service today carrying municipal water through ridges in cities including Boston, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, St. Louis, and San Francisco. The third category was transportation tunnels, the longer tunnels carrying canals, railroads, and rural roads through ridges and mountains. Transportation tunnels accounted for approximately 700 of the total, and they include the named major bores: Union Canal Tunnel, Staple Bend Tunnel, Hoosac Tunnel, and the smaller railroad tunnels of the Baltimore and Ohio system, the New York Central system, the Erie Railroad system, the various early Pennsylvania Railroad bores, and the early Sierra Nevada Central Pacific bores. Most of these tunnels are still in service today, carrying modern rail traffic. The fourth category was specialized tunnels for sewer systems, military fortifications, and isolated industrial uses. This category accounted for the remaining 300 tunnels, scattered across the eastern and central United States in various special purpose applications. The transportation tunnels category that accounted for 700 of the 6,000 pre-dynamite American tunnels included some of the most technically demanding civil engineering projects of the 19th century. Beyond the Union Canal Tunnel, the Staple Bend Tunnel, and the Hoosac Tunnel discussed earlier, this category included the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Doe Gully Tunnel, completed in 1845, the New York Central Railroad Hudson Highlands tunnels of the 1840s, the Erie Railroad Steruca Viaduct approach tunnels of the 1840s, the Pennsylvania Railroad Allegheny Tunnel of 1854, the various early Western Maryland Railroad tunnels of the 1850s, and the early Sierra Nevada Central Pacific bores of the 1860s. The cumulative bored mileage across these 700 transportation tunnels was approximately 300 miles of mountain rock, all of it cut by hand and black powder before the dynamite era. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Doe Gully Tunnel, completed in 1845, was the first major railroad tunnel west of the Allegheny Mountains. The tunnel ran approximately 1,040 feet through a granite ridge in northwestern Maryland, carrying the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad westward toward Cumberland, Maryland, and eventually toward Wheeling, West Virginia. Construction took 3 years with a crew of approximately 150 workers at peak. The tunnel is still in service today, carrying CSX transportation freight rail traffic. The Doe Gully Tunnel represented the engineering precedent that the Baltimore and Ohio used for its subsequent mountain tunneling projects through the 1850s and 1860s. The New York Central Railroad Hudson Highlands tunnels of the 1840s were a series of 6 short tunnels totaling approximately 3,000 feet of board length through granite ridges along the Hudson River north of New York City. The tunnels were cut between 1848 and 1850 under the supervision of Chief Engineer John Bloomfield Jervis, who had earlier worked under Benjamin Wright on the Erie Canal. The Hudson Highlands tunnels carried the New York Central Main Line through the difficult terrain of the lower Hudson Valley and made possible the rapid commercial development of the New York and Albany Rail Corridor through the 1850s and 1860s. The tunnels are still in active service today, carrying Metro-North Railroad commuter traffic and Amtrak intercity traffic. The cumulative casualty record across the 6,000 pre-Dynamite American tunnels is hard to estimate precisely because individual mining adit deaths were often not consolidated into national records before the 1890s. The best estimate from the National Mining Health and Safety Academy Historical Research puts the cumulative pre-Dynamite tunneling death toll at approximately 3,000 to 5,000 workers across the 47 years from 1820 to 1867. The Hoosac alone accounted for 195 of those deaths. The remaining 4,000 to 4,800 deaths were spread across the other 6,000 tunnels, primarily in mining adit work, where individual fatalities were treated as routine industrial accidents and not consolidated into engineering history records. The pneumatic drill transition between 1861 and 1869 deserves separate technical description because it was the second major efficiency breakthrough in 19th century American tunneling, parallel to the dynamite transition. The first commercially viable pneumatic rock drill was patented by Charles Burley of Massachusetts in 1866, building on earlier European pneumatic drill designs from the Mont Cenis tunnel construction in the Alps. The Burley drill was a handheld pneumatic hammer drill powered by compressed air piped from a steam-powered compressor at the tunnel portal. The drill could bore a powder hole in granite at approximately 3 to 5 minutes versus the 15 to 30 minutes required for hand star drilling. The Hoosac Tunnel adopted Burley drills in 1866, the first American tunnel to use pneumatic drilling at scale. Within 5 years, every major American railroad tunnel project had switched to pneumatic drilling, and the hand hammer star drilling method had become essentially extinct in American transportation tunneling. The pneumatic drill required substantial supporting infrastructure that the hand drilling methods did not. Each pneumatic drill required compressed air at approximately 90 to 100 pounds per square inch. The compressed air was generated by steam-powered air compressors at the tunnel portals, with the steam in turn generated by coal-fired boilers. The compressed air was piped from the portal compressor along the tunnel floor in iron pipes, ranging from 2 to 4 inches in diameter. The pipes ran from the portal to the working face, with branches to each individual drill operator. The total compressed air infrastructure for a major tunnel project might include several compressor plants, miles of compressed air piping, hundreds of drills, and a substantial coal supply for the compressor steam plants. The infrastructure investment was significant, but paid for itself rapidly through the increased tunneling speed. The economic effect of the combined dynamite and pneumatic drill transitions between 1865 and 1875 was dramatic. American railroad tunnel construction costs per linear foot dropped by approximately 60% between the pre-1865 hand drilling era and the post-1875 mechanized era. Construction schedules dropped by approximately 70%. Worker casualty rates per mile of bore dropped by approximately 50%. The economic gains made many tunneling projects financially viable that would have been too expensive to build using pre-1865 methods. The American railroad network expanded substantially through mountain regions that had previously been considered uneconomic for rail construction. The Mont Cenis tunnel through the Alps deserves more detailed treatment because it was the European technical precedent that directly informed late Hoosac and other major American mountain tunneling projects. The Mont Cenis ran approximately 8.5 miles through the Alps between France and Italy, connecting the rail systems of the two countries. Construction began in 1857 under the joint authority of the French and Italian governments. The tunnel was bored from both ends simultaneously using black powder hand drilling methods identical to the American methods of the same period. The Mont Cenis crews developed pneumatic drilling technology in the early 1860s, with Chief Engineer Germain Sommeyer of the Italian government directing the development. The first pneumatic drills became operational at Mont Cenis in 1861. The tunnel was completed in 1871, 14 years after groundbreaking. The Mont Cenis was the longest tunnel in the world at completion, and held that record until the St. Gotthard Tunnel through the Swiss Alps opened in 1882. The technical exchange between Mont Cenis engineering and American tunneling engineering during the 1860s was extensive. American engineers, including Charles Burley of Massachusetts and Walter Shanley of the Hoosac contracting firm, visited Mont Cenis personally during the 1860s to study the European pneumatic drilling methods. The Burley patent for an American pneumatic drill, issued in 1866, was directly informed by Burley's observations of the similar equipment at Mont Cenis. The Shanley brothers studied the Mont Cenis labor management approach and adapted it for the Hoosac construction. The technical exchange flowed in both directions, with European engineers also studying American innovations, including the dynamite handling protocols developed at the Hoosac after 1868. The American tunneling labor pool that worked the 6,000 pre-dynamite tunnels was distributed across the various regions where tunneling work was concentrated. Pennsylvania anthracite coal region tunneling employed approximately 2,000 workers at any given time during the 1850s and 1860s. Michigan copper region tunneling employed approximately 1,500 workers at peak. California gold and silver mining tunneling employed approximately 3,000 workers during the gold rush era of the 1850s. Major railroad tunneling projects, including the Hoosac, the Pennsylvania Allegheny, the Baltimore and Ohio Doe Gully, and the New York Central Hudson Highlands, each employed several hundred workers at peak. The cumulative tunneling labor pool across all regions probably reached 15,000 to 20,000 workers in active employment at any given time during the peak years of the 1850s and 1860s. The men who did the pre-dynamite tunneling came from the standard 19th century American mining and tunneling labor pool. Cornish immigrants from southwest England were the largest single skilled group. Cornish miners had centuries of hard rock mining experience in the tin and copper mines of Cornwall, and they migrated to the United States in large numbers during the 1830s through the 1870s, taking work in American mining and tunneling operations across Michigan, Pennsylvania, Colorado, and California. Welsh miners from southern Wales brought coal mining experience to American anthracite and bituminous coal regions. Irish immigrants, particularly after the famine wave of 1845 to 1852, filled the unskilled labor pool for blasting and rubble removal. German and Austrian miners brought Central European hard rock mining experience. American-born laborers, particularly from the eastern coal regions of Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maryland, made up the rest. Anyone who has seen the masonry on a 150-year-old tunnel portal knows this. The pre-dynamite tunneling era was a particular conjunction of available technology, available labor, and economic necessity. Black powder was cheap, hand drilling was free. The labor was available in volume. The American railroad expansion of the 1830s through the 1860s required mountain tunneling at a scale unprecedented in human history. The technology to make that tunneling efficient did not yet exist. So Americans did the work with the tools they had: hammer, star drill, black powder, fuse cord, iron rim cart, mule. The transition from black powder to dynamite tunneling between 1868 and 1875 marked the end of the pre-modern era of American mountain construction. After 1875, all major American tunneling used dynamite as the primary blasting tool. Pneumatic drills replaced hand drills entirely by the 1880s. Electric lighting replaced candle lanterns in the bore by the 1890s. The tunneling work became safer, faster, and less labor-intensive. But the cumulative pre-dynamite record, the 6,000 tunnels bored by hand and black powder before 1967, remained the foundation on which the modern American transportation system was built. Before we close, if this kind of pre-modern engineering story is what you came for, the final boss tier at $9.99 gets you members-only videos, plus your name, in upcoming uploads. Boss tier at $4.99 for early access. Link in the description. Thanks for watching to the end. 6,000 mountain tunnels were bored in America before nitroglycerin existed as a commercial blasting tool. The men who bored them used black powder, hand drills, and chisels. The records are scattered across mining commission reports, railroad construction logs, county engineering archives, and the personal correspondence of master miners and chief engineers. Many of the tunnels are still carrying water, ore, or trains today. The Union Canal Tunnel in Pennsylvania is still preserved as a state historical site. The Staple Bend Tunnel in Pennsylvania is still preserved within the Allegheny Portage Railroad National Historic Site. The Hoosac Tunnel in Massachusetts is still in active rail service. Hundreds of smaller water supply tunnels are still delivering municipal water through American urban ridges. Thousands of mining adits are still open in mountainous regions of Colorado, Nevada, California, Arizona, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. The men who bored those tunnels are mostly buried in unmarked graves near the portals where they died. The transition to dynamite in 1867 made the work faster, but the bores cut by hand and black powder remain among the longest-lasting tunnels in American infrastructure. The records prove it. The tunnels remain.